This episode is brought to you by the Marine Corps Association and Modern Day Marine. Ready to invest in your future? On May 1st, head to the Education and Employment Fair at Modern Day Marine. It's bigger than ever. Connect with top schools, employers, and transition resources all in one place. Whether you're planning your next move or just exploring options, this is for you. Free for active duty personnel. Register today at marinemilitaryexpos.com. That's marinemilitaryexpos.com. Hey, Scuttlebutt listeners, this is episode 190. This week, we bring you another installment of Strait Talk with Dr. Mike Hunzeker. A lot has happened in the world since the last time we did a Strait Talk. From China's reaction to last year's election in Taiwan to our election and changes in foreign policy, there's a lot to unpack. Starting with, what is going on? Thankfully, Mike is at the forefront of these issues to help us get to the bottom of what impact the current environment may have and is having on Taiwan, China, and our allies in the region. Here is episode 190. Hey, Scuttlebutt listeners, thank you for joining us. I'm Vic. I'm here with William.
Howdy.
And we are doing another segment of Strait Talk with Dr. Michael Hunzeker. Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing well. It's great to be back.
Yeah, it is great. It's great to have you back. Repping your Cal gear and everything for our since we're an audio show, I've got to describe our guests in full detail. But yeah, so
blue.
we were just sort of going through, God, the last time we talked, and it's been a minute. And I know there's been some things going on. So there was the election in Taiwan. Mike did a trip out to Taiwan to actually get boots on the ground. And then things changed. As obviously is just as a leveling exercise. So we had our election, and there have been some definite ideological shifts over the past 90 days. There's certainly tons of unpredictability, and our focus has definitely, I think, at least a lot of the rhetoric as folks are trying to get their feet underneath them have shifted from the focus on the East, at least within mainstream media, to more domestic issues, and then internationally, definitely focused on the West, our relationship with Ukraine, our relationship with Israel, with Europe, our neighbors, Greenland, Panama. But yet, obviously Taiwan is still very much under the, in the Wes, as they would say. And so I guess, Mike, what's happening, man?
Yeah.
I feel like a better question is what isn't happening. Like I was saying before we got started, I tried to come up with a chronological list of major developments from the last time we chatted to now, and it was too much. The zone has truly been flooded. I'm not even sure where to begin, although I would agree maybe our election and the presidential transition is as good a place as any, because I would agree that there, at least as far as it concerns Taiwan, a, a significant shift in, I guess I'll call clarity, which is probably the wrong term to use with regards to Taiwan.
We'll go with it though for now.
Yeah. I think, to put it simply, the Biden administration, although it never officially renounced strategic ambiguity as this sort of posture towards Taiwan, I mean, the president himself made it about as clear as any American president has since we de-recognized Taiwan in '79 that if China were to use violence against Taiwan, the United States would not remain on the sidelines. My sense is that this administration, again, just specifically talking about Taiwan, has made it very, very clear that we are sort of backtracking into, unambiguous ambiguity, that we will retain the right to make the decision at the moment of crisis. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. We have definitely made clear that we are not okay with China trying to coerce Taiwan, either through obvious violent means or even through, these gray zone threats. But whether or not we would deploy military forces, I think that is truly back up in the air in the way that maybe it was not under the Biden administration.
Okay. Um, what is, I guess, so what's happening in Taiwan? What is sort of their take on, like you said, this maybe intentional ambiguity, and us deferring to, you know, audibles at the line of scrimmage vice, a mapped out 20 for your first 25 plays.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, we have talked before about the Rorschach test that is sort of how Taiwanese domestic politicians and voters like interpret American actions, and even Washington's attempts to be as about as clear as one state can ever be to well, I'll call Taiwan a state, another actor in the international system. They're going to ricochet around the domestic sphere, but I would say um, it's gotten really complicated in the last few months.
Right, because
The
how long has their administration been in power now? Is it less than a year?
Well, I mean, so the Lie administration came into office in May formally. They were elected a few months prior to that. So they're coming up on a year. Now, Lie was, of course, part of the Tsai administration. So technically speaking, there is a fair amount of continuity. The DPP has now been in power what will be three, 4-year terms by the time it's all said and done. Um, and so there is continuity insofar as the DPP, and I think we've talked about this, has really, you know, it's clinging to, it's not the right term. It really has anchored itself on the side of we are the party that will be pro US and will trust in US commitments. And at the end of the day, the US will be there for us. And in some respects, that's a tactical choice in domestic politics. In some respects, it's because there's absolutely positively nothing the DPP can do that will ever make the CCP happy. And
Right.
therefore, the CCP is just like, we do not, accept your place in the political spectrum. So really, the DPP has nowhere else to turn because it cannot credibly convince any Taiwanese voter that it will improve cross-strait relations. So the only option is to say, well, we'll make sure that Washington has our back. That has suddenly gotten very tricky, certainly more tricky with the Trump administration coming in and the kind of the increased ambiguity. But then in the last, well, I don't know when you're going to air this, but the last 72 or so hours from when we're talking, the announcement of Liberation Day and the imposition of really 42% tariffs on anything coming from Taiwan, which is a hugely export dependent economy. And, for listeners with a long memory, you will recall that not that long ago, beginning of the Trump administration, as a sort of, goodwill gesture, the head of TSMC, that's the big semiconductor producer, came to Washington, bent the knee, and basically agreed to invest another $100 billion in building semiconductor plants in the United States. That was very politically toxic in Taiwan, in
Mm.
part because it's kind of giving this comparative advantage to the United States, and in part because there are many Taiwanese who think it is because Taiwan is one of the exclusive producers of high end chips that that's sort of a shield against potential aggression. So it's sort of doing all these things. And by the way, it technically broke domestic law because to make a deal that big in another country, it had to first go through the legislature. So, TSMC does this thing. Taiwan really hands out the peace offering and then turns around and gets, 32% tariffs plus the 10% base. And I think that's playing out right now as we speak. That's going to make it really tough on President Lai.
Yeah, and how real is that? Like, let's just say it passes through all of the litigation. Um, I mean, that's not it's not like a publisher's clearinghouse. The guy walks up to the White House with a big cardboard check, right? I mean, that we're talking
But Vic, is there
generations worth of funding streams, right? And I mean, even on a rapid sort of acquisition cycle, we're looking at what 3 to 5 years even get a factory built, and then you have to start hiring folks and all that.
first of all, Vic, I gotta ask: is there anybody under the rank of retired full-bird colonel who's going to get that Publishers Clearinghouse reference? They're quickly googling what is a check. No, I mean there are all sorts of just profoundly practical impediments to a lot of the, at least vis-a-vis Taiwan, of this idea. Building a factory takes a long time. If the other tariffs are still in place, getting the materials to build this factory are going to be a lot more expensive. we're at what, 4%, 4.1% unemployment. So it's not like there's a lot of slack people sitting on the sidelines and making semiconductors. If you go to Taiwan and the places that make semiconductors, these workers, and I'm not being figurative, they literally have PhDs. And so, although the academic job market has been broken, most of the PhDs waiting for jobs are people like philosophy, history, and political science, not the sorts that
Oh
can
yeah,
just
God
not the sorts that can
forbid.
just turn around
Yeah,
and start.
everybody in this room, right?
Yes, the majority of the Slack economy with PhDs looks a lot like us, and they're about as capable as we are of building high-end electronics. So yeah, it would be very hard for this deal to manifest itself in the short term. And in return, again, what did Taiwan get for all its troubles? Tariffs that could just utterly devastate its economy.
So we've talked a lot so far about U.S. Taiwanese relations. The other side of the strait, though, China. How has that evolved in the past? We'll say pull a number out of the air. 3 months.
Uh, I would say, as potentially tumultuous as the U.S. Taiwan relationship has gone, it's gone gangbusters compared to the Taiwan China relationship. Beijing has made just crystal clear, like I said before, there's nothing the DPP could do that would make the CCP happy. Uh, the Lai administration, though, is particularly been a target of its ire. So all these big exercises, one of these just concluded. I mean, like a couple of days before the tariffs were announced. Sort of poor Taiwan is like in a position where its enemies are doing it to it, its friends are doing it to it. But in essence, anytime Lai does something which is, I don't even want to call it provocative, because I think many of the things Lai has done that have quote unquote provoked a major Chinese response in the form of an exercise have not been provocative even by historical standards. But that doesn't stop Beijing from taking a good excuse and a good opportunity to signal that Lai is provocative, he is irresponsible, he is pro-separatist, he is pro-independence. This is a podcast, so I can't show it, but I would love to queue up the most recent piece of propaganda that came out of China during the exercises last week. And it was an image of Taiwan, and it showed President Lai. He looked like some sort of a worm infestation, and he comes crawling across, and there's like this grotesque sound effect as he crawls across the island, and then he starts sprouting out little baby worms, little baby bug larvae, and they're the heads of the different DPP and TPP heads. And then, of course, the exterminators show up across and light them on fire. And not only is this, of course, very indicative of how Beijing sees Lai and his ilk, but I also think we should take quite seriously the fact that this seems like, I mean, classic, old school 1920s, 1930s propaganda, clearly intended to dehumanize the quote separatist and independents. And if you put that into context of the other things that China has been doing, all the gray zone, cutting the cables, the economic coercion, but also quote unquote clarifying their laws, which justify the conditions under which they would invade, and then making very clear that being pro-separatist, pro-independence can be prosecuted and punished by things including death. And then you add this drumbeat of dehumanization. It really is making clear that they are trying to set up a situation in which, for their domestic audience, if China decided to pull the trigger, they could look at their own people and say, not only do we have to do this, but we have the legal basis for doing this. And by the way, these aren't our brothers, right? These are
Yeah.
these are
I mean, this
rebels, these
is
are
this
traitors.
is the Putin playbook for Ukraine, right? Like there's Nazis over there, right?
Yep. Or it's the Nazi playbook. It's just, this is a tale as old as time. And although in the social media age we have been numb to this, I don't think we should downplay the symbolic significance, especially with everything else going on. That this, add in the barges, we can talk about those. Add in all this other stuff. I mean, the trend lines seem pretty clear. Not that invasion is imminent, but that they are laying the practical, the legal, and the moral groundwork to be able to have that option in a viable way.
Does China feel, I guess, within the past 3 months that like the a noose is tightening around them of sorts, where they feel like that the window of where they have the ability to act and still be successful is closing? Is that because of the current administration, or is that just their policy, how it's always been essentially? Well, but always been as in like the past 10 years.
Yeah, no, so this is a terrific question. I add in the always eternal caveat that I watch Taiwan closely, not China, and I'm one of the people who believes that the two are not part and parcel of the same. And so I feel more confident making assertions about Taiwan, and even there, circumspect, than China. But when I talk to very smart people on China, I guess I could hear a couple of different ways of interpreting. The one I find most convincing is that this is just another step down a road that China has clearly telegraphed since the beginning of Xi's rise. I mean, really, I mean, going back generations, that
Yeah.
this
Well,
problem is going to be solved. But
you had mentioned in a previous straight talk about the pressure on Xi being it's his third term to start ponying up, right?
yeah, so yeah, that's what I'm saying is he has made clear that this resolution of the quote Taiwan problem is a part of his legacy. It is a part of his legitimacy. He has clearly been trying to take the steps to prepare the military in terms of transforming its command structure. He's been purging generals that are insufficiently devout or overly corrupt, one and the same potentially. And he's been investing, a long time. US military analysts say they don't have the amphibious lift. Clearly, he is being creative. The ro-ro ships that he's trying to use, and then most recently these barges, which are something that the ro-ro ships can then connect to allow once air and sea control have been established, the rapid offloading. So clearly, he is investing real resources and building up that amphibious capability, laying the legal foundation. So clearly, at a minimum, I think it is safe to say he is continuing down a path that he has been telling us he's going to continue down, and it is a very credible thing to leave invasion on the table. The other way is, of course, this windows of opportunity. What is it? 1945. That website recently had a piece out saying invasion is imminent in the next 6 months. I think that's a bit dramatic. Uh, One could certainly spin a tale that says, well, with these tariffs and the trade war, this is going to be devastating to the Chinese economy. And so it's just logical that she is going to want to launch an invasion in order to distract the people from. I, I don't want to rule it out. Year of our Lord 2025. I don't want to rule anything out, but it strikes me as a bit uh, illogical. My sense is, and talking to smart people who watch China, that China still feels that time is on its side, that we haven't crossed some Rubicon. It's not like we're handing over a nuclear warhead to Taiwan or something. And so, the United States is sort of in its death throes. It is stepping back and receding from the world stage. I'm guessing from China's perspective, they see the Trump administration is making mistakes. So, like Napoleon says, if you're making mistakes or your enemy is, just don't get in their way. Um, and I always come back to the point. I think she wants the option, but man, it's still just this massive roll of the iron die. And if he's wrong, and if he flubs, if his military is more corrupt, if it looks more like Russia's military than some cutting edge, German force of the 1940s, uh, he's done. The CCP is done. China's fundamentally destabilized. So, if I were in his shoes, which I'm clearly not, I'm just a professor, hey, I would still say continue down this path. Wait until you're in a position where you have to do something. So I'll put it this way: I'm confident enough that I'm going back to Taiwan this summer for hopefully a month. So I'm saying shenanigans to the 6 month prediction. Now, whether I end up in a jail in 6 months or not, we'll see.
Yeah, that's right. Be the shortest 6 month vacation so I guess in this era then, and obviously, attempting to read the chicken bones on something like this is almost an effort of futility, but we also wouldn't have a podcast. Um, what does deterrence look like in this sort of period of uncertainty and unpredictability?
Well, here's where I do feel confident in saying it doesn't look as good as it should. I don't think it looked as good as it should even under the last administration. I think when we met last time, I had a couple of pieces out, one in foreign affairs, a response piece, another in foreign policy, where and my co-authors, who wasn't doing it alone, was making the case that we're talking a big game with Taiwan, but we're still really not doing what we need to do to show that we're serious just about the fundamental operational problems we would face. Uh, Fast forward a year, I don't feel that we have done a lot more on that front. I feel like Taiwan has done some good talking, but I don't think that Taiwan has really made some serious steps to do what it needs to do to make its military apparatus serious. And now we have all this stuff kind of popping up where it's going to be, I think, even more difficult for Lai to push for some of these things. A good scenario would be one where we do see some, I'd call them modest, the Taiwanese would call them extreme, increases in defense spending. And hopefully those increases mean a lot more money spent on the things that will actually help Taiwan in a war, not the stuff that'll just get, either taken out in the first couple of weeks, or more realistically, will take us 2.5 decades to build for them. So, yeah, I feel a little less actually confident in the military deterrence balance right now than I did a few months ago, just because of the fact that I don't see anyone really, aside from the Chinese, doing the real practical steps of improving our tactical operational options. But that's layered on top of, sorry, a ton of strategic uncertainty,
Yeah.
which I think is really going to trickle down into Taiwan. It's going to make it really politically contentious to tell the Taiwanese, listen, do everything you can, but by the way, America may just abandon you anyway.
Yeah, and so I guess that's the thing is we're talking about, the impact that these increased tariffs could have when, and also in this spirit of like government efficiency, the biggest place or the easiest way to find a return on investment is to cut manpower because that's where your largest bill is. And last time we talked, they were trying to institute a mandatory reserve, which that's payroll, man. That's a tremendous amount of payroll. Is that going to go by the wayside, you think? Or is that an initiative that culturally the Taiwan people are embracing as a sort of a quick fix, sort of readiness thing? I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's a very insightful question, and it's the reason I spent a month back in Taiwan last summer. Is I just, you know, I feel like you really can't understand a place until you spend some serious time there. And the way to understand a place is not to go and talk to the top level policymakers because they know what you want to hear and they're going to say it, and then hope that you don't follow through. Spending a month on the ground, and I was there during the big military exercise of the year, during the big civilian exercises, just to get that pulse. So, just by way of background, manpower has become very expensive for the Taiwanese. It does for all volunteer force militaries. The Taiwanese moved away from conscription. It was still sort of there. Basically, a lot of young men ended up having to serve 4 months, and this is up until about 2022. 2022, under pressure from the United States, President Tsai announced she was going to re-increase conscription to 1 full year, and then she was going to reorganize the reserves. Technically, they had like 2 million reservists, but nowhere near a fraction of that was even ready. So this whole thing was laid out, and I think it was like December of 2022, and it was going to take effect at the beginning of this year. So this year is kind of the end of the first cohort of the 1 year conscripts. And so, what is positive is that the Taiwanese people actually were largely in favor of this change, and that surprised some of us. We thought maybe there'd be a lot of pushback. And that, the program was implemented as described, as prescribed. But here's where the problems start to appear. Number one, they don't have the facilities to actually train that many people because they shrank after they moved away from full conscription. On top of that, there are just all sorts of exemptions and ramp ups. So, like this year, they only actually brought in 9,000 1 year conscripts. Meanwhile, they're hemorrhaging people out of the all volunteer force. People are like leaving early. All sorts of what you can literally buy out of your contract if you're like, this isn't for me. They're having huge recruiting problems still. So the result net is they're still haven't solved the manpower problem. It looks like it's going to take, I think, 2029 before the conscription scheme hits full stride. And the Taiwanese military still has these buyout options, kind of like in the Civil War. Not quite where in the Civil War, you could find someone to take your place. That actually might be better because you can literally you can find exceptions and you can find your way into like civil service type roles. So there's so many ways of kind of getting out of frontline service that a lot of people are skeptical that even when it hits its full stride in 5 years, and then on top of all of this, the training, it's still just not up to snuff. For example, their big annual exercise happened in July, and it happened to coincide with a typhoon. And so I was there, and I was like, this would be a great way to show the world how flexible you can be. Because one of the announcements, so one of the longstanding criticisms is that their training isn't realistic. It's too choreographed, too telegraphed. Everybody, it's a script. And so right before the exercise, the defense minister came out and said, speaking of a dated reference, it's like sprockets. Now is the time when we dance. They're like, this scripted exercise will have an unscripted phase, and this is the time where we impromptu. And I was like, believe it when I see it. And then the exercise happens and a typhoon hits. And I was like, well, this would be a great way to show how flexible you are. Pause the exercise for safety and then finish it after the typhoon leaves and show how you can adapt. And instead, they just shut down the exercise, sent everyone home, and said, we'll recock and redo it next year. And I was like,
Uh,
if you want to show your inability to adapt to a very foreseeable, I mean, you're doing this during typhoon season. Um, so yeah, I remain cautiously optimistic that the right attitude is there, the right policies are in place,
yeah.
but the execution, I think, leaves a lot to be desired.
So I guess with that sort of, through that lens, then what does deterrence look like? I mean, are we even send like for a little while under the previous administration, we almost uh, rotated out carrier groups in the South China Sea. Is that posture maintaining? And is that enough?
Um, Maybe a no. If we can answer the two questions. The posture piece, so by the way, this is where I'm going to shamelessly alert whoever happens to be listening to this. It's not a new initiative. I've been running it at George Mason for about 3 years. I have a team of amazing research assistants that we've been training up on open source intelligence stuff and doing some sort of contract work. We've decided that we have enough of the stuff that is public facing that we've started to make it public facing. So for those who are interested in what I'm about to talk about, feel free at any point. It's called the Taiwan Security Monitor, and you can check it out, tsm.char, that's schar.gmu.edu. We also have a Twitter feed, which unsurprisingly quickly surpassed my number of followers. I think we got like 3,000 in a couple of weeks, but it's at Taiwan Monitor. Anyway, we look at satellite imagery, we follow media reports, and we try to kind of ascertain both our posture and China's posture and Taiwan's posture. It would seem that we, throughout the last year, have had a lot less in the region than certainly I feel would be an acceptable steady state given the temperature of the region. We noticed that during the last round of exercises, we had two carrier battle groups, and at least for some amount of time, we diverted one of them, the Vincent. It looked like it was heading to the Middle East. So as the exercises are going, we move one of our two carrier battle groups away. I believe now they're saying it's steaming back into the region, but in my mind, that's not a great look. I have seen, I'm not sure if this has been confirmed, but I've seen reports that one of the THAAD batteries in South Korea is being diverted and sent to the Middle East. And again, I don't know that the THAAD battery in South Korea would have really mattered a great deal in a Taiwan contingency, but if you piece it together and if you're trying to read the chicken bones and the tea leaves in Taipei, it's one thing. I mean, it's good, right? We're sending the Secretary of Defense to the region. The Secretary of Defense is going to the Philippines and Japan. They're making clear that they are not going to back down on the Biden administration's commitment to turn this Japanese-U.S. warfighting command into something less. Those are good. That's all talk, though. And so if you're looking for doing, and you're not putting more carrier battle groups and you're diverting some and other assets from the region, I guess I could totally see how one could make the case if you're a U.S. skeptic that, hey, the U.S., it's really, really not committed. So in my mind, we've got these long-standing operational challenges that we face. It's logistics, logistics, logistics.
Yeah.
We can't build the ships that we need. We can't rebuild or fix the ships that are going to get sunk. I'm hearing rumors we're cutting ground force structure, but I think for us to think a war over Taiwan wouldn't have a ground component is ill-advised. And so these are the sorts of things I would like us to see us do more if we were
Yeah.
deterrents.
What about opportunistic sort of shows of force? I know that this could have been years ago, but some of the Muse going through actually stopping in and doing some bilat training. Is that still going on?
Yeah, no, so there's a lot of bilateral training in the Philippines, some recent announcements on that front, and so a lot of this is happening. I don't know what our presence looks like in Taiwan right now. It had begun to
Mm,
ramp up under the Biden administration. I don't know if that's still steady state or not, and for
okay.
all sorts of reasons they've not publicly unveiled those numbers. So I think there's some good work in terms of having boots on the ground, doing training, especially with their special forces units and their ground units. But anyone I've talked to still seems to make the case that just the challenge fundamentally transforming Taiwan's military from kind of a symbolic apparatus to a war-fighting one. And we got
Yeah.
a long way to go, and a few hundred trainers isn't. It's probably not going to get us there as quickly as we would need, in the
Yeah.
face of these
So
challenges.
it's more like what we're doing is kind of, maybe some might get some likes at the tactical and operational level, but nothing really strategically significant.
Yeah, I have heard from many folks that, when she looks at the cross-strait military balance, he's really looking at the US, and Taiwan's kind of a rounding error. Those of us who are in, I guess, what I'll call the boiling moat camp, again, shameless pitch for Matt Pottinger's excellent edited volume, not just because I contributed the Taiwan chapter. Those of us who say that's that's not a good thing, and Taiwan has a meaningful role to play, and we need to make sure that she understands it's not a rounding error. But to do that, you got to send some pretty
Hmm.
unambiguous signals, and you got to make your military good. So from that perspective, yeah, this is in my mind not yet rising to the level of changing Xi's calculus. Because again, he looks at Taiwan, he's like, there's a decent chance they fold on the first salvo, or maybe I could just grab an outlying island and they'll call it a day. And he looks at the US, and, if it's just a matter of counting ships and the number of miles those ships have to go against the number of miles his ships have to go, and how old our stuff is and how new his stuff is, and how he has 200 times the shipbuilding capacity that we do, you know, I don't know that any of this is causing him to be like, I'm going to have to kick this can down the road to the next generation.
Gotcha.
So talk about some of the cool stuff you have on the Taiwan security monitor, and because we're doing a remote interview today, I get to actually pull it up while talking to you. You have this really cool like data visuals part over here, and the one that I'm actually pretty interested in is you have the visualization of the PLA's barge capacity in Taiwan. So I guess they developed some sort of new barge that you mentioned. And looking at this map, you sort of see how like the previously like the invasion would have been looked like in optimistic settings, either the southwest or northeast of the island. But now it looks like pretty much all the entire, of all sides of the island are now within a potential landing place.
Yeah, I
Based on
actually
some,
thought you would put up one of your kids' drawings of a spider.
but
So
so my question though is now is based on China's more recent exercises, are they looking like to be looking at towards like the repeat offenders, some of the places that have always been favorable, or now are they trying to like maybe see preparation for some of these new options available to them?
yeah, no, I really appreciate you actually went to the website. So again, shameless plugs here. One of the really cool things about this project is it is forcing me from the late 20th century into the early 21st century. So you'll always hear professors at the end of the semester say, I've learned as much from you as you have learned from me, but most of the time we're bullshitting. I will say what I love about this project is that these kids, and to me they genuinely are kids. I mean, I haven't learned as much. I have learned more from them than they have learned from me. I keep just yelling the word deterrence at them, and they're like, "All right, great, old man. Here, let me show you how to use things like QGIS and open source satellite imagery and pair them together." So one of the earliest things we did is we went back through the open source literature and we identified all of the beaches that people keep saying that the Chinese will have to use. As an old AM tracker, I'm a little suspicious that that is too optimistic. I've always thought the enemy can land in all sorts of places, Incheon, Incheon, Incheon. But we take that analysis at face value, and then news of the barges came out. And as you're pointing out, William, these barges would technically open up other previous like places where you could land some stuff, because the barges they have six of them. Three are done, three are in construction, and the idea is you can link each set of three. You can link them together to get really a long causeway, like World War II style. And then you can link up these civilian roll on, roll off ships to them, and then just quickly offload stuff. And it will allow you to reach places that previously, like your landing ships, probably couldn't have gotten to. And
We
so
actually had that strategy for a while.
we yeah. No, I mean, like
What's
the
old is new, man.
The Chinese have never shied away from being like, great idea, let me steal it. And that's half the problem. And so we took the map of the beaches that we knew they said they could access, or we said they could access, and then we compared it with work by Andrew Erickson and others at the Naval War College. And again, it's not a shameless plug because I'm plugging him, but he does amazing work on this front of the naval aspects of the problem set. I think he was the first to really do a deep dive into these barges. And we put those two together to show what beaches that these barges could potentially open up. And I think it just nicely lays out the defensive challenge because it's going to spread your defense thin. And so the Taiwanese ability to know exactly where they have to have their defenses ready to go in an area where they just do not have a lot of strategic depth is going to complicate. And we couldn't put it on that very simple map, but add in the fact there are going to be missile strikes, and there will definitely be deep inserted forces coming in. And I think it's reasonable to suspect, given the espionage rings they keep breaking, to include inside the president's office, there are going to be a lot of people who are already there. So, yeah, good. Well, I can also pitch. We have, so those who follow this closely will be familiar with Eric Gomez. He was formerly at Cato Institute, and he's been tracking the arms sales and the backlog in the arms sales to Taiwan for many years. He's now come over to us, and so we're now tracking the Taiwan arms backlog. So we've also got another part of the website where we show of all the weapons we keep selling, how many of them are actually just kind of on order. And, we want to, again, drive home the point that just because we say we're selling X, doesn't mean case closed, deterrence restored, because that stuff 5, 10, years. It can take a while, given it's all coming from the same very small defense industrial base.
What about some of the other avenues we have in deterrence, and I guess cyber is what I'm thinking of specifically, and I don't talk cyber, so I don't know what the right term is. But as far as like our capability to prevent, deter, delay, both offensively and defensively, I know we saw some cuts and reduction in our cyber posture towards Russia. Is that an avenue that can provide some fruit if we were to kind of lean more into the gray zone, or is the gray zone really China's primary domain right now?
So, and the part of the gray zone that none of us on the call probably know about, the cyber side, and one because I do not know anything about the cyber world, either how it works or what we are and are not capable of doing. I can't comment. My hope, because it springs eternal, is that we're doing all sorts of crazy shenanigans, and we are constantly reminding the CCP and the PLA that if you decide to go, like, we can stop you dead in our tracks. And maybe hopefully we have such a capability, and then all of this is just clutching at pearls for nothing. I suspect that, history of warfare being our cyber capabilities are more than we know, but less than sufficient to deter by themselves. And, so maybe it's a world in which we complicate their operations in a profound way, but she has already calculated he's okay, And again, if he's going to roll the dice, I feel like he's kind of okay losing tons and tons and tons of lives, that for him, it'll be worth it. And he thinks he can still get the drop on us. So, I don't know what's going on in the cyber piece of the gray zone. I suspect we're doing stuff to them. They're doing stuff to us. I hope that whatever our reductions on the Russian side mean surging, I guess, on the China
Yeah.
and the Pacific side. On the I shouldn't call it the conventional. On the part of the gray zone we can see, I guess I'm starting to sing a slightly different tune than I would have a year ago. A year ago, I really was trying to make the case. We made the case in The Boiling Moat. There's some chapters in that book that talk about this, that the gray zone really need to deprioritize it. It's just not an existential threat to Taiwan. That, if you can do some exercises and cut some cables and call the Taiwanese people, cause them to surrender, what are we fighting for? What I'm starting to worry about now is if you look at the steady drumbeat of gray zone exercises, and then you look at kind of increasing US skepticism in Taiwan, that if the White House really would be willing to commit forces to defend Taiwan, then we got to take that one step back and say, we do need to probably lean into the gray zone a bit more. I still don't think it's decisive, but I do think if they're doing major military exercises and we're steaming carrier battle groups out of the region, that's the wrong signal.
Right.
That we've got to show, to use the baseball analogy, we got to throw some brushback pictures of our own. And I think this is in part to give pro-US politicians in Taiwan something they can point at, to make a more compelling case to voters that, listen, it is worth spending more taxes and more defense and giving up more young men to serve in the military, more young women to serve in the military. Because right now it's a hard case to make that, I really feel like when I come back in June to Taiwan, I'm going to get a lot of with friends like these type comments from the people I talk to.
What also too, I mean, at least from my, because this really wasn't a thing when we were in. I mean, like shaping operations were very immediate. Like I'm gonna do these things, and we're talking, a long-term campaign might be a month before your LD. This is years and years of just sort of picking away or creating a callousness to you know obscure your actual intent and all of these things. um I don't know, again, like I just wonder if we're coming into the game late because this really seems to be China's playbook, man. But it does seem like it would be a low cost, a high reward sort of thing if we were to find a way to be able to influence the battle space uh, without having to commit forces.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I would say you always want to look for options that give you the most options possible, and having more stuff in the region, if only to just induce more uncertainty in the CCP's mind that, well, maybe President Trump will, maybe President Trump won't, but to layer on top of the strategic uncertainty that China must face when they're looking at us, but now the operational uncertainty, because right now it's just I worry there's not. I worry we're in a world where there's strategic uncertainty, but the operational picture is pretty clear, which is that we
Mm.
just don't have the Schlitz. That if this really went down to the mat, that we could get enough. I, I haven't done the strict math, but it strikes me that the amount of Seventh Fleet that we have in the region looks probably not much more than what the Chinese are putting out in these relatively small exercises. The Chinese are putting 20, 30 ships, and they have a lot more, and they got to go 90 miles. We're
Right.
going to have to surge Seventh Fleet, followed by other fleets 10,000 miles. And then, how quickly do we go bingo on our munitions, many of which we're firing at the Houthis? It strikes me that the fundamentals just are making the operational picture clearer and clearer in a way that we need to find a way to
Right.
muddy the waters.
Well, I think that's a good segue to my one of the questions I had on here. Is like, well, so then is unpredictability and this projection of chaos from our sort of getting away from our traditional foreign policy roles and postures, is that a strategy?
I mean, it is definitely a strategy. Will it work? Is a
Intentional?
yeah. I mean, I genuinely believe that it is an intentional strat. That this is what we are seeing is at a minimum a conscious decision to say our adversaries find this too predictable and our allies find us too predictable, and our allies in particular are free riding on us, most notably in Europe, but clearly there's also the sentiment in Asia. And so inducing a healthy level of uncertainty offers bargaining advantages on the economic front, on the security front. Now the problem is, of course, that uncertainty, the madman theory, so to speak, does cause everybody to be on their toes, and it will give greater negotiating advantages, but it also just radically increases the space for miscalculation.
Mm,
That the other side will see what it wants to see, and how that comes out, what the net return on investment, is
yeah.
is do we get more out of our allies before the adversaries miscalculate? I don't, you know.
Yeah. And then two, I gotta wonder about it, because it shakes everything. So does it also shake confidence in the alliance? Meaning, does it motivate our allies to step up to the game or just to withdraw completely?
I think this is exactly the what I'm going to be trying to watch very closely in Taiwan. And again, got to be technically careful. Taiwan is not technically an ally. We don't have a formal treaty with them, but in some ways, there's the sense that Taiwan is the canary in the coal mine. And
Mm,
so, how Taiwan goes, other allies who are more formal may watch very closely. And if Taiwan concludes this uncertainty is too much for us to bear, and China's been pushing on the door, I think those are things that we got to pay attention to. I would say the traditional international relations deterrence theory answer to this question is that the commitments that we have been making since World War II, and certainly since the end of the Cold War, are interdependent. And so you cannot fundamentally induce or inject all of this uncertainty and then expect all of those commitments to remain.
Yeah.
And, I think traditional scholar, and I'm not saying it's right, but the traditional scholarship would say, actually, even if you only introduce and inject uncertainty into one pillar of that system, you're still, everyone's looking at every pillar because they don't know when push comes to shove. So they're looking for evidence
Yeah.
that
Oh
you.
man, that's a load-bearing pillar.
Yep, exactly. But now we're just shaking the whole house. And so the traditional view, and it may be wrong, is that it is more likely than not that this is going to cause, at some point they're going to say, you know what, no matter what I do, you hit me on the econ front, you don't give me certainty on the security front. Maybe I'm better off taking my things and going home. To counter that, though, I mean, if you're in Asia, what is your alternative? Like,
Right.
so it's American uncertainty, but at least democracy, free markets. The other option is subservience to Beijing, and that might be a case of committing suicide for fear of death.
Yeah. Man, crazy
What
times, crazy times.
that might be a good way to end this episode.
Yeah, I know.
Just do a cold cut. No
Like
ads, no closing. Just call it. Call
So
it there.
leave everybody saying like, what just happened?
This is your
Yeah.
This is your Sopranos episode.
Don't stop.
Well, Mike, man, thank you so much. I always enjoy these talks and always come away, maybe not always feeling quite so rosy and fresh as we would like, but I do
Maybe not
appreciate.
always. We've never come away. I mean, like,
Yeah,
I-
fair
this is
enough,
a
fair
fun
enough.
time, but like, I'm not optimistic.
But
I'm an academic. I keep in business by making people worry.
yeah, but I do appreciate your frank assessments. Yeah, just looking forward to hearing what you come back with once you do see some. We'll have more time to see where maybe this administration truly intends to go, and then how what the ripple effects have been on the ground. Like you said, rather than just talking to sort of the military and academic elites, seeing what the lance corporals down on the, on his 4th month of drill has to say about, the potential of doing it for a year. But yeah, man, thank you so much for coming in. I don't know, William, do you have any other questions?
I'm good to go. Thank you.
All right. Well, Mike, man, thank you again, dude.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, and I look forward to coming back. I look forward to coming back, full stop. But I look forward to coming back and then having another conversation. And final shameless plug: I do have a book coming out in May, June. Represents a 3-year study of these reputational implications. So kind of my hope is I'll be in Taiwan, the book can come out, I can talk to some folks and be like, do you think I'm right? And then maybe, assuming I'm not sitting in a Chinese prison at some point, we can wax poetic about how close I was to the mark.
And also, man, remember, get that remote start, dude, for your car. Get one of your kids to fire it up for you in the mornings.
We need to have another child, the one we just don't care about. Like food taster.
Well, that's really great. So yeah, again, go check out tshar.gmu.edu. Check out Mike on War on the Rocks. And any other publications you got coming out anytime soon?
Like I said, the book, but I'll just give Scuttlebutt readers the preview of it. And the next time that we talk, you can save yourself $39.95. And my last piece would be, please take a look at our website and hire my undergrads. They're amazing.
Awesome, man. Thank you again so much.
All right, take care, guys.
Mark your calendar. Commandant of the Marine Corps, General Eric Smith, delivers his keynote in Modern Day Marine on May 1st at 1300. Hear directly from the top on priorities, challenges, and the future of the Corps. You won't want to miss it. Free for active duty personnel. Register now at marinemilitaryexpos.com. That's marinemilitaryexpos.com. We would like to thank the Marine Corps Association and Modern Day Marine for sponsoring this episode. Scuttlebutt is a production of the Marine Corps Association. You have heard the voices or contributions from Major Vic Rubel, USMC retired, Nancy Lichman, William Truding, and our guest. Ty Frazier is the editor, sound engineer, and technical producer. The Marine Corps Association is not an agency of the U.S. government. The opinions expressed in this episode are the personal views of the participants and do not reflect the official position of the United States Marine Corps, the Department of Defense, or the Marine Corps Association.